girls should be seen and not heard. Tone it down, Louisa. Simmer down, Louisa. For most of my life, I have been told I am too much. But what if I told you that posting a picture of my naked, middle-aged ass at the top of a volcano in Oregon would lead me on a radical journey of self-love and in turn give permission to thousands of other women to shed their shame and find their confidence? For most of my life, I have confined myself to the expectations of others. I have tried to be the good girl, the good wife, the perfect mum, and to age gracefully. I tried to live life by the rule book that was written by fear and shame and society, peer pressure, the media. Well, fuck the rule book. That rule book will dim your light. Today, I'd like to welcome you aboard the self-love revolution. I'm going to take you on my journey in the hopes of inspiring your roadmap to self-love and liberation from the rule book. My life is about how I show up for this journey and how I share its lessons, the good, the bad, and the ugly honesty, to permit those around me to live a bigger life. Let's start at the beginning. I grew up the daughter of a preacher in the UK. That will probably answer most of your questions. My poor father, I love you dearly. So the expectations for the rule book for my good behavior were very high. I loved growing up in the power of the community. And our home was like a family, was like a training ground for life. The door was always open and we welcomed everyone from the bishop to the homeless, to the bereaved looking for funerals, to couples in love looking to get married. My parents tried very hard to keep me under a tight rein, but my earliest childhood memories are littered with tales from the naughty table at school till I graduated to sleeping with most of the church choir. I enjoyed a good few slut years until I met a man who refused to sleep with me on the first date, and I fell instantly in love. A few years later, I found myself 5 months pregnant, waddling down the aisle, having made a curious decision to dye my hair brown as a wedding day surprise for my husband-to-be. He'd never really been a fan of the bleach. To this day, I still don't recognize myself in my own wedding photographs, in what I now realize were my earliest recorded attempts of being a good wife. Motherhood got off to a shaky start. Secretly battling postpartum depression for 2 years, while watching all the other mums nailing parenthood, I began to lose my identity and with it, my ability to ask for what I needed. It was during this time I invented a game called How Long Will It Take My Husband to Ask Me How My Day Was? Familiar, I know. Here's how you play. You wait for your husband to arrive home after a really long, stressful day, just about the same time as you're sitting down from your own long, stressful day. You start your imaginary clock and you wait. Now, some days it would take my husband 5 minutes to ask me how it was, but a lot of the times it was an hour and a half before he'd even finished telling me about his. How much simpler could it have been for me just to say to him, I really need you to ask me how my day was. But instead, I sat in martyred silence and did what I thought a good wife should do. Didn't add to his stress, didn't cause any fuss. A few happier years passed before an exciting turn of events, and he got offered a job here in Portland. Yes. With our son, now aged 10, Oscar, now aged 10, we packed up our belongings, said our goodbye, and we set off for our American dream. I quickly settled into Pacific Northwest life. I found an incredible community at CrossFit, and I started hiking thanks to a book someone had gifted us when we arrived. My very first hike I did alone at Eagle Creek. Yeah, a local favorite. I posted a picture of myself on Facebook, mainly to show off to the folks back in the UK. But the very next day at the school gate, someone asked if they could come with me the following week, and Hike Squad was established. Each week, different women would come, bringing different friends, and our group grew. Each week, it was free weekly therapy. We bitched about the kids and the husbands and the menopause to the top of volcanoes, had an amazing potluck lunch, a can of hiking wine, and bitched all the way back to the school gate. We were nailing life. These women changed my life, and the shared adventures and the challenges that we shared, coupled with the strength I got from my CrossFit community, gave me a confidence I had never felt before in my life. And my self-confidence grew just about as fast as the distance between my husband and I. And then, one day, I posted a naked picture of myself at the top of Seven Sisters here in Oregon. And then came the dick pic from the 26-year-old at the gym. Now, I'd never had a dick pic before. This was my very first one. I forwarded it to all my mates. No, I didn't. Now, call me a terrible feminist if you will, and I hate giving the dick the power. And dick owners, please, this is not an invitation to send unsolicited pictures. But this dick pic made me feel horny for the first time in a really long time. While sex had been my specialist subject in my youth, in my married life, it had fallen to the bottom of the to-do list as we had both neglected each other and put aside the most human parts of us and the most basic of needs. But damn, this dick pic caused a nagging discontent in me, and I began to ponder just how much more of me I had lost along the way. And so began the end of my 20-year marriage. I moved into the spare room, never to come out. Therapy came too late for us to find our path back to each other, as I realized with deep regret that actually it was my misguided attempts at being this perfect wife and this sacrificial mum that had meant I had downgraded myself to the very bottom of the family priority list and landed myself in this place of resentful inequity. Lockdown in the spare room coincided in a perfect storm with menopause. And I started to share more of my journey online, talking about this new power I was finding in this new chapter of my life, as well as my newfound love of vibrators and rediscovering pleasure for myself. I started to share more about my shame, and more I showed up as myself, the more permission it seemed to give other women to feel seen and show up for themselves. Thank you. And there in the spare room, I became an accidental middle-aged influencer. Women started knocking at my digital door. They were looking for a place to connect and feel inspired. I started to encourage women to be braver and give less fucks and step out of their comfort zone. Join the gym, wear more colors, but be your goddamn self. My community grew, and I could see what I was doing was resonating with women, and the mission was on. 18 months later, and still in the spare room and wondering what was next for me, my son's graduation was looming from high school, his graduation from high school, when I saw a converted old RV by the side of the road and had a big idea. Now, the plan was ambitious. Buy a bus, do it up so everyone would see her coming, and then tour the states using the bus as a beacon, throwing events to connect women locally. And I had an overwhelming desire to throw vibrators from the window as I went through the Bible Belt, and felt sure I could change the world by the time I got to New York. And I did it. I did it. I found a 32-foot 1983 Bluebird Wonder Lodge. And with the power of my community behind me and a bunch of humans that are sitting here today, I crowdfunded her, and I flew down to Arizona to collect her, naming her Susie after my mother who had recently passed. I drove her back to Portland, breaking down and questioning my choices the entire way. Once back in Portland, I set about planning the tour. I gathered an amazing team of sponsors, a vibrator company, obviously, a vagina wellness brand, a female-owned gin distillery company, and I even partnered with a non-profit to raise awareness around period poverty as I went. For those of you who don't know, there is an enormous amount of women in the world who have no access to sanitary products. Even in his sadness, my husband got on board and helped me redesign the bus that I was to leave him on. An incredible thing. An act I will always be thankful for, and I think it set us both free and gave me the permission to go. With my fear at fever pitch, departure day dawned. My PDX family turned out to wish me well and cheer me off, and stood next to my distraught husband and son as they watched me drive away and out of Portland. There were tears, pretty much all the way to Idaho. But as the miles flew, my fear turned to freedom. Oh, Susie did everything she was designed to do. It was mayhem on the freeway. Truck drivers were honking their horns. I had women flashing out of the sunroofs. Cars swerving around me trying to take pictures. And my online community were with me every mile, tuning in every day for progress reports. I had a series of co-pilots who flew out to keep me company for legs of the journey. But a lot of the time it was just me, Susie, and the open road to liberation. We caused quite a scene in RV parks when we arrived. Couples would wander by and inquire what I was up to. The husbands always wanted to know about my fuel consumption. But the wives are like, "What are you doing?" And my answer was always the same. "Well, I've just left my husband and I'm touring America, preaching self-love and confidence and trying to empower women out of their comfort zone to try new things and to seize their power, particularly in middle age." Well, the wives all high-fived me. And the husbands dragged their wives away from me as quick as they possibly could. Without fail, I gotta tell you. But what I hadn't anticipated was the women in need who came knocking at my door. at the bus door, like they'd knocked on the door of my family home, like they'd knocked on my digital door. 3 women in Arkansas in just one campsite dying of cancer alone, where I stayed and set up a group so they now cook and support for each other. Came home from a night out in Austin, found a woman who'd been beaten by her husband sitting on my doorstep bleeding. She moved into the bus till we could get her into a shelter. Everywhere I went, I met women on the run from domestic violence, from fundamental religion. I met women who'd lost their homes in the pandemic and in divorce. And I found a bunch of women who'd already thrown the rule book out and are just living life on their own terms out on the road. And turns out the liberation isn't just one way. I needed the kindness of internet strangers who welcomed me into their homes and helped me fix the bus when she broke down, which, let me tell you, was a lot. Thank you to Perry and Kirsten in Nashville. I began to realize that I couldn't change the world single-handedly, and actually the power of the revolution is much simpler than that. It's person by person and human by human, and that's how it spreads. A few weeks into the tour, I took an interesting detour and I parked the bus in Phoenix and flew over to the UK to speak at the Do Lectures in Wales. My talk was to be about vulnerability and what it's like living my life out loud online. And because I've been so focused on my work with women, what I hadn't given much thought to was the fact that half the audience would be men. After that talk, it was the men that came to talk to me, to find out how to be more vulnerable themselves. How do they show up better for the women in their lives, for their wives and their partners, their daughters, and their female colleagues? And I realized in that moment that men also have their own toxic rule books that they feel the need to live by. I returned to America, completed the tour. 6,000 miles and 28 states later, I triumphantly arrived in New York. I hadn't changed the world, but I did get to speak at a sex exhibition to 350 horny New Yorkers and was able to reassure them that their middle-aged sex life is not in fact doomed and they have their best years ahead of them. Self-love is simply the confidence to show up as your goddamn self, to be real. In a world saturated with fake social media and toxic positivity, it's more urgent than ever that we just show up as ourselves and be real. The self-love revolution journey has taught me that there is a magic in the fear, in the things we're afraid to do. That's where we grow and we learn and you live. Now, your journey to self-love may not look like getting naked on top of a volcano or leaving your husband on a vintage bus. Your journey to self-love is as unique as you are. I dare you to write your own permission slip. What is it that you would do without fear of judgment or without shame? Maybe you could give yourself permission to come out of the closet or ask for what you need in your marriage. Maybe you could give yourself permission to join a gym or the dating app. Maybe you could give yourself permission to forgive someone who's hurt you, and not for them, but to reclaim your power. Or maybe you could just give yourself permission to eat cake for breakfast. In her book, Daring Greatly, Brené Brown talks about the difference between belonging and fitting in. Imagine a world where we all just felt like we could belong without making ourselves sick trying to fit in. You're all ready. Thank you. By showing up for yourself, you're already showing up for everyone around you. You have to put your own emergency mask on first before you can save anybody else. We have to be agents of change for the next generation. Most of the women who follow me are a lot younger than me, but they're looking forward to see what their life could look like, what their futures could be. The kids are downloading from us, and I want to influence a world where we give less fucks, where things aren't perfect, and we fail, and that's okay. Now, this is the end of our journey today together, except to say, I will leave you with this. We live in a world with an epidemic of loneliness of people trying to fit in. Let's build a world without shame and without judgment, and when we just say, fuck the rule book. When you show up for yourself, you are showing up for everyone around you. And when one woman sets herself free, she sets another one free. And that is the revolution, baby. Thank you.